When you write Access VBA code, you will often use variables to represent numbers, character strings, and objects. In this movie, I will show you how to define those variables and to reduce the likelihood of errors by requiring that you declare variables within a code module. For this movie, we will use the Declaring Variables code module. So I'll just go over to the navigation pane and double-click it. This code module contains the skeleton of a subroutine called Declare Variables. So I'll just press the down arrow twice to move into the middle and start typing. Now, the first thing that you do to define a variable is to type a dimension or dim statement. So if you just type dim and then a space, you can start declaring a variable. Now the question is, what should you name your variable? When it comes to creating variable names, I use 3 criteria. The first is that the name of the variable should relate to what I use the variable for. In other words, if it's a sales total, then it should be something like sales or total, or so on. Secondly, it should be as short as possible so it's easy to type. And third, you should put some sort of an indicator at the start of the variable name to indicate what type it is. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to have a currency variable, that is a variable of the currency type, that tracked a sales total. So for that, I might type CUR, which is short for a currency, and then total, TOTAL. And note that I use the first 3 letters as lowercase and the T in total as uppercase, and that just indicates the prefix as distinguished from the suffix, or what you might think of as the proper variable name. But again, none of this is written in stone. You can use any method that you want. Next, you type AS, and then a space, and then you enter the data type for your variable. In this case, I want to make it a currency variable, so I'll type in currency, CURRENCY, and press enter. So now I have a variable named CUR total, and it is defined as holding currency values. If you want, you can dimension multiple variables on the same line, but there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Here's the right way. Let's say that I want to make 2 more currency variables. I'll type in dim, DIM, a space, CUR, which is the prefix I use for currency variables, and then have commission, which I will shorten to COM, as currency, then a comma, a space, and then another currency variable, CUR, and this time I'll make it tax, TAX, space, then as currency, as before. Now here's the wrong way to do it. What you might see in some books, and not as much anymore, but you'll see folks telling you to dimension your variables this way. So you dimension a variable called CUR, COM, and then a second variable, CUR, tax, as currency. But what you've done is declared the first variable, CUR, COM, to be a variant because you have not assigned it a type. Anytime that you name a variable and you want to assign it a type, you must type as and then the type name. Otherwise, it's a variant. It's not a big deal, but it's something you might run into, and in languages that are more strongly typed, you might run into trouble, so it's a good habit to get into. Now, one of the main concerns that you can have when you're declaring variables is a spelling mistake, and I will correct before I move on. So as currency, then tab, and I'll press the down arrow key. Now let's say that I want to create a message box that displays the commission for a sale, and I'll assign the variable CUR, CM, and that is an intentional misspelling. It's not the currency commission variable that I had above. So CUR, CM equals 1000. So 1 followed by 3 zeros, and then press enter. Now, if I want to create a message box with just that value, I would type MSG BOX, all one word, no space, then a space, and then the name of the variable that I wanted to use in the first place. So that would be CUR, then COM. So the idea is that I have a mismatch between the variable to which I assigned the value and the variable I'm using in the message box. So when I press F5 to run the code, the commission is displayed as 0. And when I click OK, I can see going back that the problem is that I used the wrong variable when I assigned it the value of 1000. That's very easy to see in a subroutine as small as this one, but when you start getting pages and pages of code, you might run into a problem that you just can't fix very easily. One way that you can make sure that you have all of your variables spelled correctly, or at least that you've named the variable you're using, is to use the explicit option. To do that, you go up to the declaration section, which is above the line where option compare database is, press enter, and then type option, O-P-T-I-O-N, then a space, and then explicit, E-X-P-L-I-C-I-T, and then press down arrow. Option explicit requires that you name any variable before you use it. So if I click inside the body of the declare variable subroutine and then press F5, Access displays an error indicating that the variable was not defined, and it highlights the line where the error occurred. Now if I click OK, and then click the reset button to go into editing mode, I can click where the first error it found is, type an O so that the variable name is now correct. In other words, it's the same as the variable I defined above. Now when I press F5, I get a commission of 1000, which is correct. Declaring your variables before you use them in a code module helps you remember which variables you're using and prevents mistyped variable names from making your programs fail in mysterious ways. There is very little more frustrating than discovering that transposing 2 letters cost you 4 hours of detective work to find the problem.